devoted to her husband. Sati, chaste. Yanra, whose. Pita, father. Nilambara, of the name Nilambara. Nama, named. Chakravarti, with the title Chakravarti. Translation: his wife, Srimati Sachi Devi, was a chaste woman highly devoted to her husband. Sachi Devi's father's name was Nilambara and his surname was Chakravarti. Please repeat. His wife, Srimati Sachi Devi, was a chaste woman, highly devoted to her husband. Sachi Devi's father's name was Nilambara, and his surname was Chakravarti. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. In the Gora Ganadesh Deepika, verse 104, it is mentioned that Nilambara Chakravarti was formerly Gargamuni. Some of the family descendants of Nilambara Chakravarti still live in the village of the name Magdoba in the district of Faridpur in Bangladesh. His nephew was Jagannath Chakravarti, also known as Mamo Thakur, who became a disciple of Pandit Goswami and stayed at Jagannath Puri as the priest of Tota Gopinath. Nilambara Chakravarti lived at Navadvip in the neighbourhood of Bela Pukuria. This fact is mentioned in the book Prema Vilas. Because he lived near the house of the Kazi was also considered one of the maternal uncles of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. The Kazi used to address Nilambara Chakravarti as Kaka or uncle. One cannot separate the residence of the Kazi from Vamana Pukura because the tomb of the Kazi is still existing there. Formerly the place was known as Bela Pukuria, and now it is called Vamana Pukura. This has been ascertained by archaeological evidence. Omagana timinandasya ginanjana shalakaya chakshu unmanitam jena tasmai sri gurave namaha. Mukam karoti vachalam bhangum amhete ganim yatkripa tamaham bande sri gurum dinatarnam. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master has very kindly come, forced open my eyes with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I offer my most respectful obeisances unto his lotus feet. By the kindness of one spiritual master, the saviour of all fallen souls, even a lame man can cross over mountains, a blind man can see stars in the sky, and a dumb man can recite eloquent Vedic poetry. So, before I forget, I wanted to share a wonderful verse which we came across recently. Very famous in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Srila Prabhupada quotes it often. And we'll attempt to recite both the Sanskrit. Not too many. We have some pundits present. Please forgive my faulty Sanskrit, but we will try. This is found in many different Gaudiya Vaishnava literatures, and Srila Sanatana Goswami, in his Brihad Bhagavad Amrita commentary, describes Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings can be summarized as follows. Arajavo, we'll try another meter. Araja Bhagavan Vrajesha Tanayas Tadama Vrindavan Ramya Kachid Upasana Vraja Vadhu Vagena Va Kalpita Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanam Amalam Premam Pumata Mohan Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Madam Idam Tantra Ara Na Paraha. The object of worship, Araja, is the Lord in his form as the son of the king of Braja. His abode is Vrindavan, and the cowherd girls who live there with him, chief amongst whom is Radhika, are his perfect worshippers, or Samradikas. The most enchanting method of worshipping the Supreme Lord is that devised by these gopis. The most authoritative source of divine revelation is the Srimad Bhagavatam. Love for Krishna, or prema, is the fifth and ultimate goal of human life. These are the basic principles of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu's belief, and we thus consider this doctrine to be supreme. Very famous verse. Generally thought to have been composed originally by one Srinath Chakravarti, who wrote a commentary, a very short commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, according to the opinion of Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu. That is the original source, but quoted often by our Goswamis in their literatures. And we said Prabhupada quotes it also. Beautiful verse. So, here we're getting a little bit of information about Mahaprabhu's intimate family members. His father, Jagannath Mishra, and mother, Srimati Sachi Devi, and also Nilambara Chakravarti, who was the father of Srimati Sachi Devi. So the Lord's maternal grandfather. And this word Chakravarti is interesting. In the synonyms, Prabhupada translates the title Chakravarti. Chakravarti can mean emperor. It's a Brahmin name, but also, like a lot of Sanskrit words and other words of all languages, multiple meanings are there. Emperor is one translation. Jarasandha was also known as Chakravarti because he was also emperor. He was a Kshatriya king, very powerful. So much so that he had many vassals or subordinate kings from different provinces who he was able to call upon to try and subjugate the great city of Mathura. And as we all know, Jarasandha attacked Mathura city not less than 17 times. It was the 18th time he was preparing to attack, and Krishna and Balaram, Krishna decided enough's enough, and he moved all of the residents from Mathura, all of his family members. Overnight, by the Lord's supreme mystic powers, he was able to transport them to his newly constructed city of Dwarka. And it's said that only a few very proud Mathura Brahmins stayed back, very attached to living in Mathura. They stayed back, and a few of the monkeys stayed back. But everyone else was transported to Dwarka. So Jarasandha, also known as Chakravarti, and of course Krishna and Balaram and Devaki and Vasudeva and all of the Lord's members of the Yadu dynasty resided there for many years in Mathura prior to this event. And every year or two, Jarasandha would attack. And Krishna and Balaram and the Lord's own personal army of soldiers, known as the Narayanas, they would easily defeat Jarasandha. But Jarasandha would go back and mobilize another army, and about a year later he would attack again. So this went on for that period of time. So he's also known as Chakravarti. Similarly, we have the name Maharaj, which can also, of course, as we know more commonly, be referred to a great king, Kshatriya, but also to a sannyasi, a renunciant who has mastered his mind and senses. Kings may be able to subjugate other kings, but more prestigious and more wonderful is a person who can actually learn to control their own mind and senses. So they also, in the renounced order of life at least, offered all respects as Maharaj. And actually Nanda Maharaj is being referred. He was the king of the cowherds of Sri Brajadam. So Nilambara Chakravarti is described, formerly Gargamuni, who was one of the priests of Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherds of Braja. and of course performed the important name-giving ceremony for Krishna and Balaram. And because of the threat of atrocities from Kamsa, that name-giving ceremony, which is normally done with great pomp and majesty, had to be performed clandestinely in a cowshed, which is very appropriate for Gopal and Lord Baladev. So that was done very secretly. And it's described that Gargamuni, he gave Nanda Maharaj indications that his divine son, without coming right out and saying it, he said, you know, your son is just like Narayan. He has all the qualities of Narayan. He may as well have come out and said, Nanda Maharaj, your son's God. But he didn't exactly say that. But he gave all indications that this child was in fact the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, so this is very fascinating, as we've been hearing. Before Krishna appears, he always empowers his confidential elders to appear before him. And we heard yesterday many of those personalities that appeared prior to Mahaprabhu's appearance, the elders of the Lord, like his parents and grandparents and his gurus, who would serve him in that capacity, and Haridas Thakur and many others who were senior. They all appeared first to assist the Lord in his wonderful pastimes of inaugurating the Sankirtan movement. And of course we will touch on this, as Prabhupada has wonderfully given here, the pastime, very famous in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, of Mahaprabhu's interactions with Chand Kazi. And it's said that Chand Kazi, it's also described, as we heard yesterday, that Jagai and Madai were also incarnations of Jai and Vijay, came a fourth time, even though they were cursed only to take birth in the material world 3 times. They didn't want to miss out on Krishna's wonderful pastimes as Mahaprabhu, so they came again. But it's also described, sometimes personalities can appear in multiple forms, or multiple personalities can appear in the same form. Just these things aren't limited by our linear time and space. So it's also described that Chand Kazi was one great demon from Krishna's time. Anyone want to hazard a guess? I can give a hint. You're right, Kamsa. Yes, same first letter. Kazi, Kamsa. And Nawab Hussain Shah, we've already mentioned. Who was he in Krishna-lila? We just mentioned the great Chakravarti who attacked Mathura 17 times. Jarasandha, yes, correct. So they came as Chand Kazi and Nawab Hussain Shah. So that's their pastimes with the Lord. And initially, of course, they appeared to be very antagonistic, especially Chand Kazi, who was the district magistrate of Nadia. And it's said there was an occasion when he just happened to be passing by Srivas Thakur's house, and he heard this most melodious kirtan being performed by the Lord and his associates, and he became very envious. And because he was a Mohammedan externally, that was his designation, his caste, and so on. So he became very envious. Up until that time, Mahaprabhu had kept the Sankirtan movement somewhat secretive performances, nocturnal. He was meeting with only his most confidential associates fellow elevated Vaishnavas were coming, and they were performing that. Even though some complaints were coming from caste Brahmins living nearby and others that we can't sleep at night. This Nimai Pandit, who was formerly a scholar, has now returned from Gaya and seems to have undergone some form of transformation, and we can't sleep at night. So they were complaining, and other personalities. But it was going on behind locked doors, and it was invitation only, and not everybody. And of course there are many mysterious pastimes described, especially by Vrindavan Das Thakur in his Caitanya Bhagavat. I think it may have been Srivas Thakur's mother-in-law who heard about the ecstasy going on in her daughter's household, and she begged for an invitation to be allowed to participate, but because she hadn't personally been invited, they had to put her in a big basket. And but then Mahaprabhu, that particular evening, he wasn't feeling the same ecstasy as normal, and he asked Srivas, is there some unauthorized person here? And Srivas was a little evasive, but eventually he had to submit to the Lord, and he said, yes, actually my mother-in-law's here. And the lid was lifted off the laundry basket, and there she was, and I think she had to leave. But maybe later she came back. And of course there was one very austere brahmachari, Brahmin, who subsisted just on fruits and milk, but he wasn't a pure Vaishnava, though he was a very austere person. He somehow or other begged to be even, somehow or other be able to peek through the door to see Mahaprabhu's gorgeous dancing and chanting with his associates. But again, Mahaprabhu rejected him. But then again, he was allowed, the Lord showed mercy and he was allowed back in. But this was the first time that the Qazi personally became involved and very jealous, and he started to issue orders to his soldiers, and of course they went one time and a mridanga was broken, and he issued a decree that if Srivas Thakur and the others don't stop this congregational chanting, then I'm going to pick up their houses and I'm going to throw them in the Ganga, and I'm even going to convert them to Mohammedanism. So it was very drastic, severe threats were made. So when Mahaprabhu heard about this, he became transcendently angry, and it's said his eyes became bright red with anger, and he very quickly mobilized massive Sankirtan with not less than 100,000 residents of Nadia. All were instructed in the morning to come in the evening with flaming torches, and numerous mridangas and kartals and wambas were all brought. And there was a massive Sankirtan procession throughout Nadia, and eventually descending on the home of the Qazi, who became terrified. His soldiers were not able to do anything, and Mahaprabhu requested a personal audience with the Qazi, and the two began discussing, and it's a very wonderful conversation. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Qazi discussed, first Mahaprabhu chastised the Qazi as a Mohammedan for eating the flesh of cows, who, as we all know, cows are one of our 7 mothers. We can try and remember some of them. Of course, the earth, mother cow, nurse, the wife of one's spiritual master. Anyone else can remember?
Real mother.
Excuse me? Real mother, thank you. Wife of Brahmanas. Wife of the king. And excuse me? Yeah. Yes, fantastic. We got the 7th. Thank you. This is how we do things in the Hare Krishna movement. Yes. So Mahaprabhu Nimai Pandit severely chastised Kazi. You take the milk from one of your mothers and then kill her. This is not very good. This is very bad. And he even explained how such persons have to descend in lower forms of life for millions and millions of births. Very hellish situation. So, but Kazi attempted to pacify the angry Lord Caitanya by explaining how he had a relationship with Lord Chaitanya's maternal grandfather. They were friends and neighbours. So this was not a good way for uncles and cousins, if you like, to disagree and to have some animosity, to be offside with one another. So eventually the Kazi surrendered in a way to Lord Caitanya, and he vowed actually from that point on he would not eat any living entities. He became a vegetarian. So that's to his good credit, and he also decreed that from that day on the Sankirtan movement, at least in his area of jurisdiction, the greater Nadia Mayapur Navadvip Dham, that no one could impede the Sankirtan performance in public or in private. He made that solemn declaration not only during his lifetime but future generations. And of course that has gone on to this date, and I think there may even be, for those of us who have visited the tomb of the Kazi in Mayapur, some inscription is there to that effect, and it was also engraved on a sacred plaque, if you like, in metal for permanent recollection, and that is still existing. Some of us have seen photos of that. It's like we carry a banner sometimes on Sankirtan. Well, this was a banner, and that sacred inscription was there that in future no descendants of the Kazi could in any way impede the Sankirtan movement. So that was a very big event, and from that point on Mahaprabhu began with his associates the famous morning kirtans, as well as Bhaktivinoda Thakur has sung, and there was once upon a time that we used to recite those prayers every morning. We used to sing Adi-lila Aruna Pura Babaji, 2 different melodies, 1, 2, and the other one 1, 2, 3. Beautiful prayers by Bhaktivinoda Thakur that you spend your nights, materialistic people, uselessly sleeping, and your days decorating your bodies. Now just fill your mouths with the names of Krishna and Hari, chanting without offense. So beautiful prayers are there. And Adi-lila Aruna Pura Babaji, in the early morning, just as the sun was rising, Mahaprabhu would go hither and thither throughout Nadia. So those wonderful pastimes are there of the Lord at that particular time. And as Vasishrestha Prabhu nicely related some months ago now, he and I were fortunate to be in Vrindavan. He's chuckling in the back stalls there because he knows what I'm about to say. 1978, when we visited Mayapur and Vrindavan, and some of our very enthusiastic Vrindavan devotees had organised a preaching program in Agra, not far from Krishna Balaram Mandir. And the word had somehow or other got to the organisers from the Krishna Balaram Temple that the Australian devotees were very good at doing plays, dramas. But the type of dramas we used to do in Australia were a little rough around the edges, we could say. A little spontaneous, because us Australians tend to be a little spontaneous, and some of us at least perhaps just a little knockabout. But anyway, these devotees arrange for this play, this particular pastime of Mahaprabhu chastising Chand Kazi to be performed on a stage at a program in Agra. But Agra is a predominantly Muslim town or city. So suffice to say, the play didn't go down very well with a lot of the local Muslim people, and we almost started a riot. And we had to be dragged off the stage. And somehow or other the locals were pacified, and prasadam was quickly distributed, and no lives were lost. But these early pastimes of the Hare Krishna movement, sometimes time, place and circumstance. Madhurangi's laughing because I'm sure in numerous travels with Indradutta Maharaj, sometimes things go a little pear-shaped, Madhurangi, yes, in Brazil and even in Gujarat and so on. All in good intentions are there. What do they say? The roads to hell are sometimes paved with good intentions. But anyway, in the preaching mission, sometimes people get a little upset with the devotees. What to do? Prabhupada did say that people will love this movement as long as we don't preach very vigorously. As soon as we preach very vigorously, people get sometimes a little annoyed with us, a little upset with us. We have to be very careful. But all these things have been going on. Yes. And Prabhupada, interesting story. Prabhupada had a friend during his business life as a Grihasta businessman. Prabhupada had one friend, Abdullah, who Srila Prabhupada used to buy small glass bottles from over many years, and they were friends. But then Abdullah was a little older than Srila Prabhupada. At one point he told his dear friend, Abhay Charan, that he was retiring and he was giving up his business. And Prabhupada asked him, so what are you going to do in your retirement? And Abdullah said, I'm going to construct one small mosque. And Prabhupada commented in this regard that in olden days, people were more pious, irregardless of what religion they were, that they would try to do some profoundly spiritual activity at some point during their life. Either construct a temple, or a church, or a mosque, like that. So Prabhupada did tell that story of his old friend Abdullah there once. Also in regard to Chand Kazi, interestingly, of course, there are many different aspects to this pastime. One of them is that when the Kazi would order his soldiers to go and harass Srivas Thakur and the Vaishnavas, the soldiers reported back that whenever they issued orders and attempted to break the mridangas or chastise the devotees, their beards would catch on fire. And so they would become distracted trying to put out the fires in their beards. And also famously, Chand Kazi revealed when Mahaprabhu did come to his house in an angry mood, that the night before he'd had a dream. And that dream, a lion-like personality, or at least a body of a demigod, powerful personality, but with the head of a lion, had come there very angrily and sat on his chest, and with his razor-sharp nails had actually started to scratch his chest, threatening to bifurcate him, just as he'd done the great demon Hiranyakashipu. And the Kazi actually opened his kurta and showed Mahaprabhu, see? And there, sure enough, were marks identical with that of a lion's nails. So these extraordinary, wonderful pastimes are there. We'll read about them in great detail. Prabhupada gives a wonderful synopsis as he's discussing these different personalities as we move through. But of course, wonderful festival yesterday, Lord Nityananda Prabhu's appearance, very wonderful festival. And Krishna works in his own wonderful ways. We've been going in recent weeks for walks early in the morning past the lotus pond. And as we all know, the lotuses bloom in the month of January, late January and early February. So I was seeing all these gorgeous lotuses blooming, but I wasn't seeing them being offered to their lordships on the altar. So having a very critical mentality, I was thinking, why aren't the pujaris offering these lotuses to their lordships? Little did I know that the pujaris had a plan, and that plan was to harvest them in mass, as was done, and gorgeously, to everyone's astonishment, decorate their lordships' altars so beautifully yesterday, and some of the lotuses are still there. And of course, lotuses are very much symbolic. Krishna is said to have even a navel which is like the whirl of a lotus. What to speak of lotus feet, lotus lips, lotus face, lotus hands, because the lotus is considered the most beautiful of all flowers, and Krishna is the most attractive. So we're very blessed here. So much opulence here in New Govardhana, at least once a year. The lotuses bloom profusely, and they can be offered in such a wonderful festival as yesterday. So, and philosophically, we're so fortunate. Bhakti is such a nice process. Unlike other processes of yoga, which are there, it's in bhakti that we get enormous help. We're not just struggling on our own, but Krishna, Tesham satati yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So if living entities become dissatisfied with material enjoyment and turn to Krishna, then Krishna gives us the intelligence how we can come to him, if we want to go to him. Of course, if we have minute freedom, independence, free choice, we may not want. Not many living entities do necessarily want to give up very limited material enjoyment and go back to home, back to Godhead. But for those of us who are aspiring in that way, we get a lot of help from the Supreme Lord, topmost yogis, and that's Krishna's statement. Yoginam api sarvesham makkatenda antaratmanam sharavam bhajate yo mam same yuktatamo mataha. Of all yogis, he who abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in loving transcendental service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So that's Krishna's statement, and he is accepted by all classes of transcendentalists, both personalist and impersonalist, as the supreme authority on all yogas. So, and the wonderful aspect is that, and this is a verse by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, one of our favourites, Bhukti Mukti Siddhikami Sakale Ashanta Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Ata Eva Shanta. And the Venerable Goswami describes the different types of living entities, the bhuktis, which means gross sense enjoyers, the muktis, those aspiring for liberation, the siddhis, those aspiring for mystic powers, and the kamis, those who at least follow Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. But Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says all of them are ashanta, not peaceful, because they're all harbouring some separate material desire. So as long as you have material desires, you can't be peaceful. But he explains, Krishna Bhakta Nishkam. Nishkam means no material desires. Desires of devotees are just to please Krishna's senses and see Krishna glorified throughout the three worlds. So Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Ata Eva Shanta. They're peaceful. Devotees are peaceful because no separate interest except Krishna's pleasure and happiness and satisfaction. Not only peaceful, but as Krishna says, there's no question of happiness without peace. Did I get that right? Yes. So And an interesting aspect is what's known as, all over the world, in dry continents and countries, there is the phenomena of dry riverbeds that appear to be completely devoid of water. And in India, near Gaya, is one famous Falgu river. And Falgu can mean false. So it looks like a riverbed, but there's no water flowing in it. But if you dig down deep enough into that and many other so-called dry riverbeds, and you will feel moisture. There will be some current flowing there. You may have to dig quite deeply. And of course, animals like elephants in southern Africa, the great matriarchs of the elephant tribes, they know these secrets because the elephants are said to be blessed with very long memories. Mahouts have to be very careful not to ever be cruel to their elephants, because the elephant will never forget that. And later on in life, if the Mahout has not been very kind to the elephant may very easily take the life of that Mahout. So elephants have long memories, and the matriarchs, they know where the water is to be found. And of course, they're very, very powerful with their trunks and their tusks. They can dig holes down into the water, where the water is in the so-called dry riverbeds. So this analogy is given to describe personalities who outwardly may appear to be very renounced, very austere persons. But unless they're Krishna bhaktas, there's every likelihood that there's still some material desire. It may be deeply rooted in the core of the heart, but they're still aspiring for something. It may be some name and fame, some prestige, sometimes described like that. But it's still there, or to get some powers. Mystic yogis, they want to have some powers. So that's the great benediction of bhakti, that we can actually become peaceful and happy, and not only that, but very blissful, like the kirtans yesterday, and regularly here. Such a blissful process, bhakti. So I might stop there. Thank you, everyone. Any questions, comments, or corrections this morning? That's okay. Ram Prasad Prabhu.
I was thinking, it's pretty amazing.
If you hold, otherwise I can repeat, Ram. Yeah, but looks like the microphone is just now coming.
Talking about how a king or a sannyasi is addressed as Maharaj because they can control their mind and senses. Now in the material world, here we are in these bodies, and it's so infrequent that someone can control their own mind. That it's so that rarity. We call that person Maharaj, that they can actually control their own mind. The rest of us are just out of control.
Well, you're a very controlled personality. So yes, it's true. It is rare, but at least we're on the right path. And but yeah, devotees of whatever ashram, we're fortunate like that, at least to have a chance, whether we're wearing the ochre robes of an official sannyasi or the white cloth of a respectable gentleman, or the beautiful saris of our ladies, at least, controlling our minds and senses to some extent. Thank you. Yes, Krishna.
But I'm just wondering, is there a particular moment or time or situation that the Sankirtan went from nocturnal to external? Because you said that it happened at that particular time in the Shankazi, but my understanding is Shankazi had already chastised devotees and broken the Danga in an outside situation. So, was there, because I've never read it in Adi-lila that there what made Caitanya switch?
Well, I did read extensively yesterday, and that came up, and I'll try and find it for you if I can. It's a long article.
Didn't Nityananda then appear that time too?
Yes. Once again, the sequence of events. Krishna. The sequence is not absolutely abundantly clear, but I may not be able to find it because it's really, but I can show you, Prabhu. It's maybe later, not to hold everybody up. Krishna, but let's just see. Well, here's one thing, it may not be exactly, but that same day, continued Kazi, my orderlies came to me saying that whenever one of them tried to stop kirtan, fire suddenly struck all of their faces and their beards burst into flames. I told them to go home and forget about stopping the kirtan. So, and of course Kazi got a big revelation where he said, Chand Kazi then revealed his heart to Gauranga, to Gaurachandra, saying, quote, I know that Narayan is the supreme god of Hindus, and within my mind I feel that you are the same Narayan. Lord Caitanya smiled at the Kazi and said, the chanting of the holy name from your mouth has performed a wonder. It has nullified the reactions of all your sinful activities. Because you have chanted 3 names of the Lord, Hari, Krishna and Narayan, you are undoubtedly the most fortunate and pious. Tears welled up in Kazi's eyes, crying, he touched Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet and prayed, quote, only by your mercy have my bad intentions vanished. May my devotion always be fixed on you. But yes.
Just a quick announcement. The class roster will go up later this morning and tomorrow is Srila Narottam Thakur's appearance day. So there'll be a special class on him tomorrow.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much. It's gone out throughout the Bulbulva and Swa on the camera. All right. Thank you. Yes, Mr. John.
Just a couple of thoughts about Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu's question. In the nocturnal kirtans it was just a bunch of participants, right, in a circle. I might assume that someone else may just go out and perform kirtan. Devotees who were not allowed into that circle, and the Kazi's servants might have broken their Ranga. And that became known to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I'm just speculation here. It's not that Lord Chaitanya made a decision that, we just stop nighttime kirtan and go out. It might be someone else just randomly performing kirtan, and then Kazi's men chastise them, something like that.
True. Yes, there were events which led up to the public and the chastisement of the Kazi. Yes, Mahaprabhu worked his transcendental magic, and I was thinking also, just very briefly, the wonderful exploits of Prabhupada, really empowering his earliest disciples to go to big cities all over the world and start doing Harinam Sankirtan, much to the astonishment of local people, and often imprisonment and chastisement and attempts by local government officials to to stop the chanting in public, but somehow or other, one by one, in every instance, the devotees were successful, and everyone in time accepted the Sankirtan. And of course, some places we have to look in different parts of the world still. There is perhaps some prohibitions, and there are, of course, world events like terrorism attacks. I think in France for some time, no assembly allowed, nobody could get together. Martial law even being enacted in certain countries, and then of course COVID. None of us could do very much at all, but things change around. Alright, Jai Go Premanandi, Sri Caitanya Charitamrita ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai.